healing illness from within. Jesus told us how, but we never got the memo. What if one of the most powerful teachings Jesus gave us was not only about preparing our souls for eternity, but also about helping us live more peacefully right now? Jesus talked about forgiveness again and again. Forgive those who hurt you. Forgive those who offend you. Forgive repeatedly. Pray for those who mistreat you. Do not spend your life consumed with hatred, anger, and revenge. For centuries, Christians have understood these teachings primarily as spiritual instructions, and they certainly are. But perhaps there is another dimension worth considering. What happens inside the human body when we refuse to let go of anger? And what happens when we finally release it? Modern science has given us a much better understanding of the relationship between the brain, nervous system, breathing, stress hormones, and the rest of the body. And when we look at some of this research alongside the teachings of Jesus, something fascinating emerges. Forgiveness may not simply change how we feel about another person. It may change what our own bodies are experiencing. Before we go further, however, we need to make an important distinction. Forgiveness is not a medical cure for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease, or other illnesses. No one should stop taking medication or avoid medical treatment because they believe forgiveness alone will cure them. But chronic psychological stress can affect the body, and stress-reducing practices may support overall health and well-being. And this is where forgiveness becomes extremely interesting. Think about what happens when somebody hurts you deeply. Maybe someone betrayed you. Maybe somebody lied about you. Maybe someone took money from you. Maybe a spouse was unfaithful. Maybe a family member abandoned you. Maybe somebody humiliated you 20 years ago. And even today, just hearing that person's name changes your mood. The event may have happened years ago, but something remarkable can happen. You remember it. You replay the conversation. You remember what they said. You remember what you should have said. And suddenly, your body begins reacting to something that isn't happening right now. Your heart may beat faster. Your jaw may tighten. Your shoulders become tense. Your breathing can change. You may feel pressure in your chest or a knot in your stomach. The event happened years ago, but your body is responding today. That is because the human stress response does not operate solely on what is physically standing in front of us. Our thoughts and memories can help trigger physiological responses too. When the brain perceives a threat, the sympathetic nervous system can become more active. This is commonly called the fight or flight response. The body prepares for action. Stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol can become involved. Heart rate can increase. Muscles tighten. Breathing can become faster or shallower. Blood pressure can temporarily rise. This response is extraordinarily useful when we face genuine danger. If a car is coming toward you, you don't want your body calmly discussing the situation. You want it to react. The problem comes when the emergency ends, but emotionally, we continue reliving it. We can repeatedly react to yesterday's pain as though it were happening today. And this brings us to breathing and oxygen. You may hear people say that stress prevents oxygen from reaching the brain. That isn't quite scientifically accurate. Your brain continues receiving oxygen while you are stressed. But stress can change your breathing pattern. Some people breathe rapidly. Others breathe shallowly. Some unconsciously hold their breath or tense the muscles involved in breathing. When we begin to relax, breathing generally becomes slower and more comfortable. The cardiovascular and respiratory systems can operate without the same acute stress response. So rather than saying forgiveness suddenly allows oxygen to reach a brain that wasn't receiving oxygen, a better way to understand it is this. Forgiveness can help remove one source of repeated emotional stress, allowing the nervous system and breathing patterns to move toward a calmer state. And that brings us back approximately 2,000 years. Jesus placed an extraordinary emphasis on forgiveness. In Matthew chapter 18, Peter essentially asks Jesus, "How many times do I have to forgive somebody?" 7 times. Jesus responds with a number far beyond Peter's suggestion, often translated as 77 times or 70 times 7. The point was not mathematics. Jesus was describing a way of living. Do not build your life around keeping an emotional ledger of offenses. In Mark 11:25, Jesus tells his followers that when they stand praying, if they hold something against someone, they should forgive. Think about that. Prayer and forgiveness were connected. Before continuing to carry the offense, release it. Then there is one of the most extraordinary moments in the New Testament. Jesus is being crucified. He has been beaten, humiliated, mocked, nailed to a cross. And according to Luke 23:34, Jesus says, "Father, forgive them." Whether we approach that statement purely from faith or also consider its psychological implications, the principle is remarkable. Jesus refuses to allow hatred to have the final word. Now consider something else. Who suffers when we refuse to forgive? We often imagine that our anger is somehow punishing the person who hurt us, but the person who offended us may be somewhere eating dinner, watching television, and enjoying life. Meanwhile, we're lying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, replaying what they did. Their heart isn't racing. Ours is. Their muscles aren't tense. Ours are. They're not rehearsing the argument. We are. That's why forgiveness can be misunderstood. Forgiveness isn't necessarily something you do because the other person deserves it. Sometimes you forgive because you deserve freedom from carrying the offense every day. Forgiveness also does not mean pretending something didn't happen. It doesn't mean saying abuse was acceptable. It doesn't mean giving a dangerous person access to your life again. It doesn't mean abandoning justice. And forgiveness does not automatically mean reconciliation. Those are different things. You can forgive someone and still establish a boundary. You can forgive someone and never lend them money again. You can forgive someone and still report a crime. You can forgive someone and decide that the relationship cannot continue. Forgiveness says, I refuse to allow what you did to control my inner life forever. That distinction is extremely important. Now let's consider the nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system has different branches involved in regulating bodily functions. The sympathetic nervous system helps prepare us for activity and danger, the familiar fight-or-flight response. The parasympathetic nervous system is associated with processes sometimes described as rest and digest. The goal isn't to eliminate the sympathetic nervous system. We need it. The issue is whether we are repeatedly activating stress responses because we continuously rehearse anger, fear, and resentment. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase everywhere you go. At first, you might barely notice it, but carry it for an hour, then a day, then a year. Eventually, you become accustomed to the weight. You may even forget what it feels like to walk without it. Resentment can become something like an emotional suitcase. We carry conversations that ended 10 years ago. We carry divorces. We carry betrayals. We carry what our parents did. We carry what our children did. We carry what an employer did. We carry what a church did. We carry what a friend did. And sometimes we become so accustomed to carrying these things that anger becomes part of our identity. Then Jesus gives us this seemingly impossible instruction. Let it go. Forgive. At first, that can sound as though Jesus is concerned primarily about the person who hurt us. But perhaps the instruction also protects the person who was hurt. Because forgiveness can interrupt the cycle of remembering, reacting, becoming angry, experiencing stress, calming down, and then starting the entire process again tomorrow. This doesn't mean every illness comes from stress. It certainly doesn't mean sick people are sick because they haven't forgiven somebody. That would be medically unsupported and spiritually cruel. Illness has countless causes, including genetics, infections, environmental exposures, aging, injuries, lifestyle factors and processes medicine does not yet fully understand. But chronic stress is a legitimate health concern. It can affect sleep. It can influence blood pressure. It can contribute to muscle tension. It can affect digestion. It can influence behavior, including eating, alcohol consumption, and physical activity. It can leave us feeling exhausted. And poor sleep itself can create another cycle of stress. So when we reduce unnecessary chronic stress, we're not claiming to cure disease. We're creating better conditions for the body to function. This may help us understand something else Jesus frequently talked about. Peace. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you, Jesus says in John 14:27. Again and again, the biblical message tells people not to live consumed by fear, anger, and anxiety. Pray, trust, forgive, release, rest, seek peace. These are spiritual principles. But interestingly, many of them also involve mental states associated with calming the stress response. Perhaps we have separated the spiritual mind and physical body more than we should. The person praying is still living inside a biological body. The person forgiving is still operating with a nervous system. The person experiencing peace is still breathing, sleeping, digesting food, and regulating a heartbeat. Spiritual experiences do not occur outside the human body. They occur within it. So what might forgiveness actually look like? It may begin with something very simple. Identify the person or event you are still carrying. Don't pretend it didn't hurt. Don't minimize it. Say exactly what happened. This person betrayed me. This person abandoned me. This person embarrassed me. This person cheated me. This person hurt somebody I love. Acknowledge the truth, then recognize the difference between remembering an event and continuing to emotionally relive it. You don't have to erase the memory. You probably couldn't if you tried. Instead, you make a decision. I will not continue paying for this event with today's peace. For a Christian, that decision can become a prayer. Jesus, I don't know how to forgive this person. I still feel angry. I still remember what happened. But I don't want to carry this anymore. Help me release this person and this offense. Help me forgive. And here's something important. You may have to do it again tomorrow. Forgiveness isn't always a single dramatic moment. Sometimes forgiveness is a process. You forgive. The memory returns. You feel the anger again. And you release it again. That's why Jesus' response to Peter was so profound. Again, again, again. Forgiveness can become a practice. Now imagine adding slow, comfortable breathing to that moment. Sit quietly. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Allow yourself to breathe naturally and slowly. As you exhale, imagine releasing what you've been carrying. Not because what happened was acceptable. Not because the person necessarily deserves another opportunity, but because you no longer want yesterday's injury controlling today's nervous system. You are not changing history. You are changing your relationship with history, and perhaps that is part of what we missed in the memo. We interpreted forgiveness as Jesus demanding that we excuse people who hurt us. But maybe forgiveness was never about pretending evil wasn't evil. Maybe part of forgiveness is refusing to allow somebody else's actions to keep producing suffering inside of us. Jesus said, forgive. Jesus said, pray. Jesus said, seek peace. Jesus said, do not live consumed by worry. Jesus said, love. Jesus said, rest. And 2,000 years later, science continues discovering just how closely the mind and body interact. That doesn't mean the Bible is a medical textbook. It isn't. And it doesn't mean prayer or forgiveness should replace doctors, medicine, surgery, or appropriate mental health care. They shouldn't. It means we can care for the whole person. Body, mind, and spirit. Take the medication your doctor prescribed. Get the medical tests you need. Eat nutritious food. Move your body. Get adequate sleep. And perhaps also ask yourself, what am I carrying that I no longer need to carry? Who still has the power to make your heart race simply because you remember their name? What argument are you still having in your head? What betrayal are you reliving? What happened 10 years ago that your body is still responding to today? Maybe forgiveness isn't saying, what you did was okay. Maybe forgiveness is saying, what you did will no longer own me. And when that burden begins to lift, the shoulders can relax, the jaw can unclench, breathing can become easier and more natural. The mind can become quieter. The body can move away from a repeated state of emotional alarm. And perhaps that is one reason forgiveness feels so much like freedom. Jesus told us to forgive. We thought he was only talking about the person who hurt us. Perhaps we never completely understood the memo. Forgiveness may also be about freeing the person who is carrying the hurt, you. So tonight, before you go to sleep, consider one person you need to release. You don't have to call them. You don't have to invite them back into your life. You don't even have to tell them. Just sit quietly. Breathe, pray, and say, Jesus, help me forgive. Help me release what I cannot change. Give me the wisdom to keep the boundaries I need, the courage to face what happened, and the peace to stop carrying yesterday into tomorrow. Then breathe, release, and rest. Because sometimes healing from within begins not by adding something new to our lives, but by finally putting down something we've been carrying for far too long.